The rest of TSM holding strong. Omar barely lives fed, barely lives as well. Afro back in double pulses. Haunter now taking the rest of the front side of the team fight. Darshan shoots back in, kills Haunter. CLG, no! Everybody dies! Too much damage! CLG overextend and 3 of their carries die. Darshan's gonna go down as well. That's 4 dead. And TSM should be able to win the game.
Welcome to NALCS tonight, Week 9 edition, the conclusion of the regular split for the North American LCS. I'm Dash here with Jat and Zyrene to break down all the happenings, get a little bit of a preview for both the promotion tournament and the playoffs. So we've got a heck of a lot to get through. So I'm just going to yank up the standings real quick to break down where the teams stand moving out of the regular season. So as that flies up, what we'll notice is that, of course, TSM remains in first in terms of regular split standings, whereas Immortals drops down to second with today's results. Counterlogic Gaming snagging up third. To close out our playoff picture, we got Cloud9, Dignitas, and Envy, Liquid, and Phoenix 1 in the promotion tournament.
Yeah, and it turned into a very top-heavy split. You can see the top 5 teams, half of the league, and 11-7 is the worst record amongst all those guys. So really from Dignitas up, these guys were pretty dominant down the stretch, and it's going to make for really exciting playoffs.
Yeah, and when we came into the beginning of this split, I said it would probably be the most competitive one because none of the teams had actually changed, right? It's the same organizations, very little in terms of roster swaps and rookies. But then it started to kind of, towards the end, become one of those ones where, like you said, it's very top-heavy. But we're still looking at teams like Phoenix 1 near the bottom of the standings that actually had some games where they took off of like Immortals and top teams. So it did become very competitive again towards the end. And we saw really fast games where like top teams were like 25 minutes, let's end this.
Yeah, these past couple weeks were obnoxious in terms of average game time from our winning teams specifically. But let's go ahead and jump into some of the most important series of the weekend. And I'm going to start with TSM versus CLG. Again, this was positioned as a battle for first place for TSM. If they win, they got it. That's what they did, and they did it in 2-0 fashion.
This series has a bit of everything in it, and I loved just the way that it ended because it was back and forth, the Baron calls that went through for TSM to be able to pull one off of a reset from CLG, and then the final fight was one that's going to live on in their minds forever.
Yeah, and we mentioned how we've had a lot of fast games. That's against teams that are very disparate in skill. You can see these games can still go long, 54 minutes. And I happen to remember a TSM CLG game where Doublelift got a bunch of kills on Triss in that exact spot.
Literally in that spot.
2015 finals, he just switched teams and did it for both. So
he also tweeted out that in that Jinx game there was a play, it was a very minor play. Aframu comes walking up into the lane while Doublelift is just clearing minions, and he tweeted out afterwards, I legitimately thought Aframu was on my team because he doesn't respond. It's very clear that he's not moving, and then he just gets pulverized. And I thought that was hilarious. I don't know if it was the champion or the player name that made him think he was on the same team, but of course that wasn't the case. TSM here, they're going to feel good about the 2-0. They had a dominant game 1. Bjergsen in the interview afterwards talked about how messy that second game was, and from both teams, there was a number of individual mistakes that they'll be wanting to shore up. But I think at the end of the day, it was just the perfect image of a TSM-CLG series where you get that back and forth, nail-biting, comes down to a team fight, and one team comes out on top, and it could be the other one the next time.
And like you're talking about, at the end of the day, for TSM, though, they do end the split, or at least the regular season, in first place, which is the goal for the team every single time, is to get #1. Now they're coming into playoffs with that first-round bye and then an easier opponent in the semifinals. So TSM have accomplished their goal again so far, and that's really what matters, because even if they took 54 minutes to do it, etc., they're still #1, and it looked like Immortals was going to be the #1 team for a while.
So that leaves a bitter taste in Immortals' mouth then here, because they had a 2-0 weekend in terms of match victories, and yet they don't hold on to that first place seed. They're going to get the first round bye still, but they fall down into second.
Yeah, and Immortals came out angry this week, it felt like. They would have had the #1 seed if they hadn't lost to Dignitas last week, because they were at a point where they could control their own destiny after some impressive wins, but they really performed this week. I mean,
well, you talk about fast games. You talk about fast games. The games that Immortals put up this weekend were some of the fastest, barring the C9 win earlier today.
Yeah, I love that play from Pobelter where he actually kills Froggen, because a question mark ping came out right afterwards. I was uh-oh.
I like it, I like it. They're feeling good.
They're feeling really good.
That team is feeling good, and I would feel good after the performance they put up this weekend very specifically. Of course, they have a history as an organization of not performing in the playoffs when they come in hot. again with another first-round bye. We'll see how they adjust to 7-16, and hopefully there are no missteps in Champions League so that we can really see some quality semifinal games and perhaps a new team in the finals.
I mean, it would be incredible if Immortals can keep this run going, because this is a team that wasn't even in the playoffs in the spring split.
Right?
They bring in one new jungler and a new head coach. Coaches can make a big difference, as can junglers, but those guys have to be so happy about that, and maybe even just looking for more recognition. And I think the reason people have slept on Immortals this split as the #1 team, I mean, they're #2 and been very close to #1, is because they didn't make playoffs last split. They've been good for 2 months.
Right.
How long can they sustain that? And the playoffs are going to be where they're tested.
That's the question. Talking about the playoffs, let's pull up our quarterfinal matchups. I'm going to leave the semifinal matchups for later. First up, C9 versus Dignitas, our 4v5 matchup here. What's you guys' take on this one?
I feel like Dignitas started to go into a slump, and they haven't actually beaten C9, even with the roster that they currently have. They're 2-0 with Cloud9 having those match wins. They did go to 3 games each time, but we're seeing Dignitas drop games to teams that are way below them in the standings now and go to 3 games very consistently.
Yeah. Match of the week.
All right, there it is. It was a concern today that we talked about briefly on the analyst desk, which is that Dignitas, even in some of their victories, don't look wildly impressive, but in a way that is maybe made to be felt because they move so slowly, right? We had the essentially 2-win victory a couple weeks back. Today they had a couple wins that moved very slowly without aggressive and proactive plays, whereas again, you look at that TSM CLG game, yes, it was chaotic, but both teams were forcing the other into a decision tree minute after minute.
Yeah, and even though I think C9 is favored based on the head-to-head record and the reputation of it, Team Dignitas cannot be underestimated. They were on that 4-match losing streak when Adrian wasn't playing. The team that was Dignitas for the first month of the split was not the team we have now. Adrian and Altec is a completely different ballgame. Their shot calling is different, their style is different, their draft is different.
An 11-7 record where 4 of those losses are not with the roster that you currently have. That's something to be considered.
It's not even that. They started Chaser in the split. 3 different players on this Team Dignitas team. So by no means is their record indicative of what type of team they really are. So it could be anyone's series.
That one's match of the week. The other one, the 3-6 matchup, is CLG versus Envy. Again, we talk about a struggling Envy here at the end of this split, barely eking their way into the playoffs there. Of course, they do have next week to, this coming week to kind of retool and come out with maybe something that could shock us in a best-of-5, but CLG looks good.
Yeah, CLG looks good, but think back to last split. CLG dropped to FlyQuest in a 3-6 matchup and lost to the 6-seeded team because they underestimated them and got reverse swept in that series.
There you have it.
CLG can't really let that go by them. If they start losing some games, they can't have the tilt set in, which did happen before.
Yep, very much so. That's something to be considered and be wary of moving into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, you do have to be worried about Envy because of Lyra, but at the same time, you look at the trajectory of these teams in the playoffs. 2 weeks ago, C9 and Envy were both at 8 wins. And we said, man, C9's had a hard schedule, they've got an easy schedule coming up, and the opposite for Envy. Envy's lost to all the good teams that they are then going to play again in the playoffs, and that's going to kill their mentality, and it hurts your practice when you're losing so much because it's been so long since you succeeded, you start questioning what you're doing. The window there is that COD still doesn't look great with Omar God, and that's the risk. But I think COD's huge favorites.
Right. Outlook, not good, but anything is still possible for Envy moving into that quarterfinal. Finally, I now want to pull us back into this weekend's games, talk about Phoenix 1 versus FlyQuest, because these were the 2 teams fighting to avoid the promotion tournament, save their championship points from spring, and hopefully qualify for the regional gauntlet and make a roll for runs later.
Everyone was watching TSM COG, but this match meant so much more, Dash. It's literally the chance at Worlds versus the chance of losing in the promotion tournament. Huge. And the game we saw here, for those of you that were watching TSM and COG, I was casting this, Lemon Nation was a god on Janet. Look at the initiation on the Phoenix 1 team. Kled, Sivir, Tarek. But they could never get a fight. For the last 50 minutes of the game, FlyQuest was deathless. They kited it out, they turned it around, they 2-0'd, and they still have a chance at Worlds.
So they've got those 30 championship points. They're going to require an Envy loss in the quarterfinals in order to slot into that final spot for the regional gauntlet. Of course, the high-led team is the one that has the shot to make the miracle run once again to Worlds. We did hear in an interview from him he'd like to avoid having to reverse sweep the entire way through it, but that's left to be decided.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they'll be able to do it because there's a lot of teams that are, if they slot into it, like just assuming that, Envy does lose and that FlyQuest are in there, they're going to have to face teams like TSM, CLG, Immortals, etc. So it's going to be incredibly difficult. And the last time they ran it, it was kind of a not so much top heavy, but like a top 2 heavy league where I believe Team Liquid was one of the teams that they had to take down back when they were 3rd. They had to go through, I believe, TIP at the time too.
Right. I mean, if you think that, only 2 of our top 5 teams are going to actually qualify for Worlds, and then the rest will go into the gauntlet. That's a scary set of teams for FlyQuest to have to run through in order to make it there. I want to turn our attention now to the OP5 for the 9th week of play. In the top lane, we've got Hanser, Xmithie in the jungle, followed by Jensen, Doublelift, and Ole to round us out. Who are the big standouts here for you, though, in this week of play?
For myself, it's Xmithie and Jensen, because I feel like Xmithie really just, you talked about Immortals coming in angry, and I feel like we really got to see how Xmithie plays this week and even last week, where he's going for those defensive builds, but he's out jungling almost everybody he goes up against, and he always has like a really good mid-game or early game read on them and is able to outplay.
Yeah, and Ole's another huge part of that team that week over week shows up in a huge way, and it's the jungle support synergy that they have down better than anyone else in the league. Standout player, though, for me, for his clutch performances is Doublelift. Yep. Just amazing team fights at the end of 2 of their victories and the end of 2 of their 2-0 series. So showing his team fight mechanics, again, even though he's been in the league for 5 years.
Got a point there?
And we talk about how, like, at the beginning of this split, Doublelift was coming back. He had the rust coming in off of being in kind of retirement for spring, and they were looking for him to have that kind of pop-off performance at the start. Wasn't really there, and he amped up and ramped up, and now as they're coming into playoffs, he's having those Doublelift performances that people have come to know and love him for.
It's all about returning to form for TSM. We had an interview with Bjergsen at the end of the day here. We talked about, I do believe this is the best set of 5 players of any iteration of TSM roster, but that we're not quite where we were necessarily last summer in terms of dominance, and they're still looking for that polish that they maybe once had. He also did give a nod individually to Ole just to kind of refine that point that you were talking about, saying that he thinks Ole would be one of the guys who should be in conversation for MVP of the split, as he's been a rock star for Immortals right alongside Xmithie. Now, earlier in the day, we asked you to send in some of your favorite moments from the summer split, so we're going to fire through, rather, a few of those now. First up, Raf Alibaba says Niski with the big quadra kill against TSM. Let's take a look.
We gotta wait for Bioarcade Barrage the second time around as Apollo can go right back in and he finds the kill. Niski's dominating. A slow in the back. 91 Bjergsen, Niski gets it! That was huge out of him, and now that's one of the carries gone. Double force drop, and he could be stunned at the chase in for Niski. A triple kill out of the Lucian in the mid lane. They're gonna go for number 4, a quadra kill for Niski. And it's only Bioarcade left alive. It's going to be Envy pulling off the victory. Niski with 4. Are you kidding me with that flash forward over Bjergsen's W to get the kill?
That play had everything in terms of casting as well. Like, I was like, it had a freak voice crack, it had a quadra kill in it, and then it had Kobe with a "Are you kidding me?" at the end. Like, that was kind of like just like an encapsulation of what that play was.
Catch all, we got everything.
Yeah, know when to flash forward. I think that's what we consistently learn throughout the years.
You don't talk about a guy who is also impressed, though. Niski, in a sense, has flown under the radar, but I've enjoyed watching and tracking his improvement throughout even his short stint here in the North American LCS, coming in midway. First coming in on Syndra, showing a mastery of that champion to some degree, and then starting to kind of diversify across the Talias, the Lucians, and the whatnot. Next up, CLG Ump says, my favorite moment in summer was the wombo combo of Orianna and Xayah for CLG. That was just amazing. Let's take a look at this one.
They use a bunch there to be able to get that because they know just one kill. Uh-oh, CLG looking for a counterplay, though.
I'm going to be there. They're going to knock up. The shockwave is there as well. They picked him off immediately. 2 for 0.
I'm looking. Yeah, I'm looking too. Okay. Ready? I'm going on Jetson?
Yep. Okay, right here.
Jump, ulting. We got him. Jump.
That was Rakan's debut as well, I believe.
It was just so quick.
Yeah, and in a small way, those plays also mean that CLG got the 3rd seed, because the reason they beat C9 in the tiebreak was because of the 2-0 head-to-head, and that was a big part of that series that was super close.
Yeah, it is huge. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that those 2 teams ended with the same match record because we talked about the struggling C9 a couple of weeks ago and how many wins would they pick up here in the latter half of the split. Next up, AKAP323. I like it. Mike Young's amazing play on Italy against Immortals was the most hype moment of the split. Let's take a look.
Zig didn't even get to spend that goal to Mike Young. Gonna have to be the real hero.
He's been good. Has he been amazing? He might be able to kill Xmithie here. What is he doing?
Execute!
Mike Young!
Mike Young looking to steal away the Baron, but he's getting chunked. He has to be careful with it.
He needs to buy time because this is gonna chunk them. He's gonna kill Ole.
Oh, yeah, he's gonna get the kill Mike Young, the savior.
They have to try to make a play.
Don't need to try. Don't play, flash. Man, don't flash too.
Nice. I can come on in 8 seconds. I can get there.
Slow.
2 seconds. I'm coming.
Nice.
Oh shit. I'm coming.
Nice. Go Nash. Go Nash. It's fine.
Where did that Mike Young go? What happened?
Left them in Europe.
He started building Cinderhulk. And it was all over.
That's true. The meta did kind of flop away from him, and we even saw him really trying to pick up the tanks when Elise, Lee Sin, and these others could still be viable to some degree.
It's strange though, because like he did have a few Nidalee games even when it was the tank meta, and there were times in Champion Select where like the enemy team had a Gragas and you knew what their top laner was at the same time, and I'm like, he could totally play Nidalee here.
Right.
And then he went for even like Lee Sin near the end, right? I'm like, oh, where are those Nidalee performances? Like he could easily be rookie of the split. If he kept
Well, that's
that
what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Even still, with the downturn of Phoenix 1, it's plays like that stick in your brain and make you remember the name Mike Young and perhaps throw a vote for him for rookie of the split up against a few other guys. Finally, Luna Bumblebee Tuna says, I like the hidden pigeon on NALCS tonight. Hashtag pigeon MVP. We're glad you caught that.
Yeah, it's not very well hidden if she could notice it.
That's true. We failed. We failed at our jobs. We almost had him. We almost fooled him. But there he is, right back there. I love it. Anyway,
my hand was blocking it apparently because I was like holding my water.
There it is. Yeah, see, there's no
So they
pigeon
told
on
me to
this
move
show. What
my
are you
hand.
talking about? Anyway, gentlemen, that's going to do it for the 9th week of NALCS tonight. Don't forget that playoffs start in 2 weeks. Promotion tournament next week. We'll see you then. Good night.